light. After the divorce, the silence in the apartment felt heavy, like dust. Elara sat on her unmade bed as morning light filtered through gray curtains. Joy felt like a forgotten language, and the walls seemed to press inward, mirroring her own shrinking heart. She walked to the bathroom and looked into the mirror, but the woman staring back was a stranger. Elara searched the reflection for a spark of the person who used to believe in forever, but all she saw were the tired lines of a long winter. She reached out, her fingertips pressing against the cold glass, trying to bridge the gap between who she was and who she had become. Gravity felt stronger these days, making every step a monumental effort. Elara finally forced herself to open the front door, the hinges creaking in protest. The world outside was vibrant and loud, a jarring contrast to the monochrome stillness of her heart. She stepped onto the porch, squinting against the unexpected brilliance of the afternoon sun. In the small communal garden between the buildings, she saw Clara. The older woman was kneeling in the dirt, her movements slow but deliberate. Clara had lived through many seasons, her face a map of 1,000 stories. Elara stood by the gate, watching the way Clara handled the plants with a tenderness that seemed impossible in a world that had felt so cruel. Clara pointed to a rosebush that looked more like a collection of thorns than a flower. She began to prune the dead wood, the sharp snap of the shears echoing in the quiet afternoon. She spoke about how the most beautiful blooms often required the harshest winters to prepare them. Her movements were steady, guided by a certainty that Elara envied. "You think the break is the end," Clara said, finally sitting back on her heels. "But a garden is just a series of endings that lead to new beginnings." They sat together on a weathered stone bench, the scent of damp earth rising around them. For the first time in months, Elara felt a flicker of something that wasn't pain, a quiet acknowledgement that she was still standing. That evening, Elara didn't pull the curtains shut. She sat at her small kitchen table with a single yellow tulip Clara had given her, placed in a glass of water. The yellow was so bright it felt like a shout in the quiet room. She picked up a sketch pad she hadn't touched in years, her hand trembling slightly as she made the first mark. It wasn't a masterpiece, but it was a choice. A few days later, Clara invited her in for tea. The older woman's apartment was filled with mismatched furniture and walls covered in photographs. As the steam rose from their mugs, they didn't talk about the divorce or the loss. They talked about the taste of cinnamon and the way the light hit the trees at dusk. Elara realized that respect was sometimes the simple act of showing up for yourself. Elara returned to her own home and began the slow process of reclaiming her space. She gathered the remnants of her past, the old documents, the photos that stung to look at, and placed them in a box. She wasn't throwing them away, but she was no longer letting them occupy the center of her life. As she cleared the clutter, she felt the apartment itself finally exhaling. She began to paint again, not to create something perfect, but to feel the slide of the brush against the canvas. Colors that had seemed muted for a year began to vibrate with life. She realized that while the love she had known was gone, the capacity to love the world remained. Her hands, once idle and heavy, were now stained with cobalt blue and sunset orange. One afternoon, Elara walked through the local park. She saw couples holding hands and felt a pang, but it was no longer a sharp stab of despair. She watched a child learn to ride a bike, falling and getting back up, and she understood that resilience wasn't about never falling. It was about the quiet dignity of the rise. She felt a thread reconnecting to the world. Standing on her balcony at sunset, Elara looked out over the city. The sky was a bruised purple and gold, beautiful because of the coming dark, not in spite of it. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew now that hope wasn't a destination. It was the architecture of the light she chose to let in. She took a deep breath and was no longer afraid of tomorrow.